Hello, everyone, and welcome back to It's a Numbers Game. I'm Adam Morris, and as always, I'm joined by my co host, Daniel Welling. Cybersecurity is still one of the hardest things for MSPs to sell properly. Not because the tools don't exist, but because most business owners don't think they're a target. Of course, until it happens to them. In today's episode, we are joined by Adam Pilton from Heimdal. And Adam's background is different to most people in our industry. He spent 15 years in law enforcement as a cyber detective, dealing with real victims, investigating cybercrime, and seeing exactly how criminals make their money. So today we are talking about why small businesses are actually the main target and how MSPs can use real stories, not scare tactics, to get clients to take action. We're going to get practical on what good looks like, how to frame security as a journey, and how to stop clients buying the cheapest package and expecting a premium outcome, and where Cyber Essentials and the NIST framework fit into a sensible roadmap. And if you're struggling to keep clients engaged between QBRs, Adam shares a simple approach to keep security on the radar without turning every conversation into doom and gloom. So let's get into it.
Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Really pleased to be here.
And Adam, we've already pointed out in our conversation in the green room that we're going to have to refer to you and other Adam in order to know who we're addressing. So for the next 20 minutes or so, you will be Heimdal Adam versus finance team Adam. So Adam, Heimdal Adam, that is, you've got a really interesting role with Heimdal, which is convenient given that that's your name. But tell us a little bit about how that came about and the sort of things that you get involved with day to day.
Yeah, certainly. So, as you know, my background is in law enforcement. I was a cyber detective and led the covert operations management unit for the police service, police officer for 15 years. And then I moved into the private sector, where I then went on to work as a consultant and help multinational businesses. Before then move into, we call it the largest certification body in the UK. I imagine most of the people on this podcast will know who that is. But I work for them as an auditor for Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. And throughout all that time, throughout all those varying roles, it's given me a completely unique perspective on cybercrime. So from dealing with victims, whether they be individuals, whether they be businesses, investigating the cybercrime itself, arresting cyber criminals, taking them to justice, and then say moving forward into the businesses, helping businesses put up the controls that then stop these cyber criminals, whether these businesses be well equipped with resource, money to be able to implement controls, or latter stages of my career where it's smaller businesses that really don't have the time, money, and to be fair, sometimes the motivation to do too much because they're too worried about focusing on generating income themselves, and cybersecurity is really low down the pecking order. So my role here at Heimdal is to bring all of that together, those experiences, that knowledge to the table to essentially educate MSPs, small businesses, anybody and everybody really, but ultimately MSPs, because these are the guys and girls that are front line and essentially going to be helping small businesses implement cybersecurity. So I do that via webinars, blogs, talking on stage, things like this, attending podcasts and speaking about how I can help cybersecurity be implemented across businesses and my beliefs, views, and experiences with that.
Brilliant, and lots of interesting questions already on my mind. I guess the first one and where you finished was around the storytelling piece, because I think that's one of the key. You hear about large company with a particularly challenging situation, and you're like, well, they're not going to be interested in little old me and my business. And is that your experience as well, sort of the starting point there to have relevant stories?
Yeah, exactly that. And unfortunately, that is a case, a story that we've all seen many times, isn't it? Small businesses just simply don't believe that they're worth targeting. Whereas in actual fact, and from my experience as a police officer, I can tell you on a daily basis, the cases that were coming across my team's desk were exactly that. Small businesses for being hit for, on the grand scheme of things, minimal amounts of money, like looking at £10,000 or less, but that's enough for a small business to cause potentially serious problems, but it's enough to impact that business. And it's also just under the threshold to actually be of real interest to media. And in terms of police investigations, we're not going to put all the resources into that volume of crime because there's so much of it. So yeah, the Marks and Spencers, the Jaguar Land Rovers, they get the headlines, they get the resources in terms of investigations. But the reality is cyber criminals make most of their money where they're not being watched, which is small businesses.
And is there any data available anywhere to use as evidence for this that MSP can get hold of?
Yeah, certainly. So I would suggest looking at the Action Fraud website, that they've actually got a database there that you can manipulate to show the information you want. I don't mean manipulate in the wrong way, but in terms of apply filters so that you can look at a particular geographical region of the UK, for example, or industries, that kind of thing. Not manipulate the data. Don't do that.
So that information will actually reveal X number of small businesses that were hit with some kind of financial ransomware and the outcome of that as well, or it wouldn't go into that detail?
Yeah, so categorized at a high level, so you can look at the types of attacks. So, for example, a category could be fraud. And then, yes, you could look at the outcomes in terms of investigated, no further action. I believe they've got an outcome as well for like the going through court. I can't remember what the terminology is now. But yeah, so those are some of the filters you can apply.
Great. How much longer are you going to struggle alone? Watching cash flow slip through your fingers, wondering why your MSP isn't giving you the life you promised your family. You didn't start this business just to scrape by. You started it for freedom, financial security, control. Yet, here you are, stuck in the grind, firefighting instead of growing. Or maybe you've built something solid, but you know you're not ready for the sale or exit you dream of, and you can't afford to get this wrong. We've been there. We've built and sold MSPs ourselves. We know exactly what it feels like to hit that ceiling. That's why we created our mentoring to turn struggling MSPs into profitable, sale-ready businesses. Here's the truth. One MSP grew profit from 300K to 1.3 million in a year with our help. Another small MSP went from a 10% loss to 10% profit in 12 months. You can do the same. Book your free consultation now at mspfinanceteam.com. We'll tackle one issue holding you back and give you clear next steps, no strings. Stop surviving, start building MSP and the life you set out to create.
And that perhaps gives some statistical weight to a discussion that an MSP might be having with an MSP. But as we know, 87% of all statistics are made up. So are there more realistic stories or sources of reference available? Maybe Daniel's fish and chip shop had an incident, and this is how it affected Daniel and all of Daniel's suppliers and staff. Yes, something like that as a more relative example.
Definitely, yeah. So, and what you said there about the stats is pretty much exactly my point. If you think about the majority of cybersecurity presentations you've been to, whether it's in person or webinars, etc., you get, hello, my name is X, and here's a load of stats for you. And the stats always paint the most horrific picture. And like you say, I'm sure the majority of them are accurate to some degree. But you know the stats, they're never going to be telling you that everything's good, or they're never going to highlight an area that's good. It's highlighting a problem, which they then go on to talk about. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, it means that every single cybersecurity talk that you go to pretty much always is the same, that same thing. And that's why I think storytelling is really important. Now, you mentioned, are there any stories? There's loads, and unfortunately they keep cropping up. And if we think about the same time that the Marks and Spencers incident happened, we also heard about the haulage firm that was, I think it was like a 158-year-old business, that essentially they were hit by ransomware. It encrypted critical financial data. They couldn't recover it. There was no way out. And essentially the business folded. It had been around for, say, over 100 years, but it was no longer able to survive. That actually happened 2 years before Marks and Spencers, but nobody cared until Marks and Spencers came out and cybersecurity was top news and everyone was interested in cybersecurity. And that's exactly the point. 2-year-old story then becomes relevant because of a big name. And there's so many stories out there like that. And obviously, yes, that one being a 158-year-old business going bust from cybersecurity. That is a good story for the media, but it happens day in, day out. It's not always interesting. It's not always sexy to read and hear about or watch, but it very much is the truth.
And in quotes, good story that you mentioned there in a recent event we were discussing about how tricky this topic is to broach, because not everybody wants to be a doomsayer, and how do you make this a positive, so that it's not volcano insurance, and how do we approach the SME that again, wow, that's a small business and it happened to them, so it could happen to me, but how do we then make it accessible, the challenge and then the solution?
Yeah, certainly. So one of the things I always say is that cybersecurity is a journey. Yes, there's going to be different milestones along that journey, whether it be frameworks like Cyber Essentials or ISO 27001, whatever it may be. But it's very much a journey. You will never get to the end of it, but you have to start it. That is the only positive thing, the definite thing that's going to happen within that journey. Now, along that journey, and this is something I speak to lots to about MSPs, and I'm part of numerous different groups that meet up and talk. And one of the things that MSPs say that they're struggling with, and small businesses too, when I've worked with them, is that they don't have the money, they don't have the resource, the budget for expensive, flashy tools. So what quite often happens is MSPs will have different bundles or packages. They'll have the basic one, building all the way up to, let's call it premium 3. Most small businesses will go, I'll get basic 1 because it's the cheapest. And then that way, cybersecurity's covered. And then they'll sit on basic 1, the budget one, forever. They won't change it, but they will expect the premium service. If they are breached, well, then they'll be turning to their MSP and go, what has happened? We're paying you for this service and we've been breached. And every MSP has this problem where they want to offer security. They want to offer the premium package to everyone, but they know they have to offer that budget package, but people don't budge. So what I'm saying and what I believe should be happening is, 100%, we need budget 1. That needs to be the starting point for everybody. But when you sign up to budget 1, you're also signing up to sitting down and talking strategy as to how we're going to get ourselves to premium 3 in whatever time frame that may be suitable for that small business. But when we get to premium 3, we keep going. So we're constantly improving our security, but sensible and appropriate to us, because you can spend all the money in the world on the best tools, and just by getting to premium 3 or beyond, it doesn't mean you're safe. You're never going to be safe and secure 100%, because there's always going to be a way to get through for sure. But it's just making sure that you're, I mean, I hate saying this because it's said all the time now, but it's making sure you're not the low-hanging fruit ultimately. That's the aim of the game.
And do you have any particular framework or model that you like to use or recommend using to help the MSP navigate that story and that journey? Because I mean, I was always a big fan of the house or the home model with the gate and the locks and the guard dogs and the razor wire and all the rest of it. And that was all a metaphor for different components of security. And in that model, you were protecting your children and your dog and your artwork, and that kind of stuff. But there's lots of different standards out there, different models out there, different frameworks. Is there any particular kind of approach you like around this?
Yeah, certainly. So I'm a big fan, as you probably guess, of Cyber Essentials. I think that makes complete sense, particularly obviously here in the UK. It makes complete sense for a number of reasons. One, because we know it works. The stats support it, that it does work. One of my favorite stats is that 60% of people that complete Cyber Essentials learn something new. And it's not just the first time they do Cyber Essentials, it's every time they do something. And that is a real key ingredient to cybersecurity. It's actually learning as you're doing, because then you start to realize, actually, now I've thought about it, this part of our network, or maybe the IoT we're using, is completely never been looked at before, completely not part of the cybersecurity setup we've got. It's that realization, and as well as the people you've got across your organization. So for me, Cyber Essentials, and then naturally progresses to Cyber Essentials Plus. And then I personally like the NIST cybersecurity framework. For me, it makes sense. It's a nice balance, I think, of implementing both the technical along with the process, and then embracing the people element as well. And for me, one of the big things is, as you probably gathered with the whole storytelling approach, is the people. I genuinely believe that Of course you need the tools. I'm not saying you don't need the tools. I genuinely believe you could have all the best tools in the world, but if you've got people that don't care or aren't interested in, don't follow the processes you've got in place, those tools are worthless.
And just to confirm for our audience listening, the stat you gave was in the 13% of real stats, not the made up ones, in what you said. And the second thing, I think Cyber Essentials does get a bad rap in terms of the non-plus version, but I agree with you that I think there is a benefit to the unaudited version because it does bring a conversation to the surface. It raises information. It helps that even if it's a subliminal. Adam,
I get what you're saying. You're kind of transporting it to me right now.
Finance team Adam can edit
I'm
that
not
out,
sure if the AI editor is that good.
Don't get me started on AI
We're seriously
editing.
asking for some significant capability here. I'm not sure.
Even if you can't say the word, it helps raise that topic in the mind. And it's part of that journey, isn't it? It's the first step. If you take some of the individual aspects of it, and if all you did was this, and if all we did was that, it is gonna help move people along and improve the process. So it's a step on the journey. So yeah, I'm 100% with you on Cyber Essentials, and it does make sense to do it bit by bit, and it is what you see most of the MSP community now, that into their sort of regular road mapping, QBR, TBR type process. Is that like one of the key agenda items? What are we going to do next for security for you?
Yeah, definitely. And that's exactly what it's all about, isn't it? It's about having that roadmap that everyone's clear on. And I think one of the things with Cyber Essentials that I used to say quite a lot was that achieving Cyber Essentials is one thing, and then maintaining that standard throughout the rest of the year until you go to Cyber Essentials Plus, or even when you renew in 12 months' time, that's the important bit, because anyone can achieve it on day one, but maintaining the fact that, yeah, you're patching as you should be, that you're running standard users and admin users, not just allowing everyone to run admin all the time. That's the important bit. But yeah, I totally agree. For me, Cyber Essentials, it does get a bad rap. Why is that the case? I think probably mixed, because yeah, some people do abuse it. They write down what they like, sign it off, and they're Cyber Essentials certified. So you have to judge it by the organization that's got it. And I think it's really, Cyber Essentials is something for you as a business rather than necessarily wanting to show off to others. Obviously it does help, but that's why Cyber Essentials is there. Because if you do want others to look at it, if you get Cyber Essentials Plus, a third party has come in and verified what you've said in your self-assessment, in the Cyber Essentials self-assessment. So yeah, for me, it's the go-to for UK businesses.
Is there any challenge around where Cyber Essentials sort of fits in the journey, and a client signs up to the MSP Cyber Essentials compliance service, they get the tick in the box, they bought some essential tools and essential services to manage that. So now they're thinking, we're good. You know what? We're good. We've got the tick in the box. We don't need anything else. So now there's a resistance to further conversations about upgrades, and there's something new over here because there's a new threat. So is there a level of complexity around kind of almost just simplifying it too much? I've got the badge. I don't need to worry anymore.
Yeah, and I think that ties back into that stat of the 60% of people learn something new because they are learning, because they are seeing cybersecurity, rather than seeing that PowerPoint slide that says this many people are affected, or hearing the stories of the things that have gone wrong for other people. They're actually seeing the truth for their own business, what the reality for their own business is. And in particular as well, their users and how they're set up. Are they actually implementing MFA? Very few businesses successfully achieve MFA implementation across all their users. There's always someone that turns it on because they're told to do it. And then when no one's looking, they turn it off because it's a pain. They see it as a roadblock for their day-to-day use of their machines. So having sight of that, understanding that, you know what, my team, people I work with, they don't actually understand the importance of this. They're doing it because tick box compliance, they have to. But the reality is it's so much more important than that. And it's funny you should mention that, because today I've released a blog. Like I said today, I'll go back a bit. It's funny you say that, because a few months ago I released a blog in relation to the fact that cybersecurity has a motivation problem. And I genuinely believe that's one of the biggest problems that we have, motivation to do something, because cybersecurity is seen as complex. And don't get me wrong, it is complex. It can be very technical, but at the level that the majority of us are working on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't need to be hugely technical at all. Passwords, MFA, the basics, if we're doing those properly and having that awareness, then that's going to mean the majority of businesses are relatively safe. And that's probably the level that majority of businesses need to be running at.
And that's exactly the two sides of the argument that in the cyber essentials getting a bad rap is, oh, it's too simple, it doesn't go far enough, and it's just a badge. And the other end of the argument is, well, you should have all of these other areas covered and you should be spending this and doing that. And it's unrealistic to expect the SME business that has lots of other pressures to absolutely focus all their efforts on that, on achieving excellence in that one area. And you've just got to accept that there isn't perfection in this. It's a journey. If the minimum outcome we get is that someone's got a bit more awareness of the risk, then that's as much of a win as someone spending £1,000 a user a month on security.
And just on that as well, the key light bulb for me years ago on this was recognizing I had a duty to educate the client on the fact that it was his risk, not my risk. Because they don't think like that. They think you've got it covered. Well, you look after everything, right? Well, no, we don't actually. And so you need to understand what level of risk you are shouldering here, Mr. Client. And I think that was a key kind of aha bit, turning it from a product solution discussion into a risk discussion. And that really moved things forward for me anyway. Any thoughts around that, Adam?
Yeah, so it's funny you should say that, because lots of the MSPs that I speak to have been saying exactly that, and then going that one step further to get it written down and signed. So essentially a contract that says, this is your responsibility, this is my responsibility, and we both understand that, to make it crystal clear. Because like you say, and like we sort of touched on earlier, really, the whole idea of having that budget cybersecurity package, the small businesses, they then assume, yeah, I'm cyber secure because I'm paying for that package. And that's not the reality at all, far from it. So I 100% agree that the contract should be in place. So people are explicitly clear. Certainly signing something makes you focus your mind. But what I've also seen happen and hear about is MSPs saying, well, do you know what? I don't want you to be my client. If you're not willing to implement the controls that I'm telling you that you need to have, then that's too much risk for me. So I do not want you to be my client. So thank you very much. Goodbye. And I think that is a good approach too. It's certainly not the first thing you should turn to. That's obviously after a lengthy process of trying to educate and implement the right controls. But certainly if someone's not listening and they simply don't care, then that isn't the client that you're going to be working with. They're going to cost you a lot more money in the long run and ultimately distract and take away your attention and resources when you're trying to help them mop up, which means it's going to impact upon your other clients.
It's another example of that grayscale from something's better than nothing to perfection. And if all end user businesses were perfect and compliant, then actually there'd be less opportunity for MSPs to help along on that journey. So it's a bit of a paradox in some ways, but absolutely agree. It's a good level to have for an MSP to be aware and protect their own business and commercial interests, but equally not to go straight there with an overly aggressive and ultimately maybe detrimental to the MSP as much as the end user business that just requires some education and some time and patience and can follow the breadcrumbs to get better over time. So really, I mean, it is a complex topic, not just technically, but also from a risk and a commerciality perspective. So what have we learned so far? Storytelling, having a clear communication between MSP and clients. What are we missing? Anything that we've not covered on this?
I guess, I mean, we have covered it. I was going to say trust, but we have covered it because that MSP sits in that position of trust, which has been the sort of thread throughout the conversation, Calvin. So I think we've covered.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges as well around this sort of journey conversation is this kind of, from a focus perspective for the client, they're trying to build and run their own business, right? And buying security services is just a distraction for them. It's something they don't want to do, but they know they've got to do it. And so it's not really a conversation they want to have, probably. They kind of want it to just go away and work. And so again, there's a bit of resistance there for the MSP to keep introducing this subject, keeping the client on top of it. Maybe this is on a quarterly basis or twice a year. So it's almost like the MSP's got to get more creative, come up with more interesting stories, package it in different ways to keep it interesting, to keep it alive. Otherwise, you know what, Adam, I've just heard enough. Can we not talk about that this time? I'm buying everything you tell me I need. Can we move on, please? I've got Cyber Essentials. We do it every year. So any sort of thoughts in general around, I mean, what are you hearing? What are the best MSPs that you're seeing doing to kind of keep this alive as a topic along that journey, really? Because it's that necessary reminder. Don't get complacent. There's always something new coming around, that kind of arms race discussion.
Yeah, certainly. I think this all comes down to relationships for me. So you have that relationship and you have it outside of the QBR as well. Yes, the QBR is where you're going to sit down and talk about the nitty gritty and the sort of tactically how you're going to achieve it. But between QBRs, that's when trust comes into play. So you should be speaking to your clients throughout those 3 months and sharing snippets of information, whether it's to people like myself. Obviously, I put out a weekly cyber snapshot where I share the latest cybersecurity news. The whole purpose of that is to educate MSPs. So when they're speaking to their clients, they come across as informed. They know what's going on, and it builds that authority and builds that trust. And for me, sharing those pieces of information, sharing those little snippets, not to cause FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but to simply inform and make sure that it stays on their radar. It's not just something we speak about every 3 months. The client agrees to everything, says, yeah, you're right, and then forgets about it, because that's not what that QBR is for. That QBR for me is for the client to come to knowing, right, I've got these concerns. How can you, MSP, help me address these concerns? And equally, the MSP to bring concerns they may have about their client's network estate to say, right, these are the issues that I see. This is the plan going forward to address those. So it's an ongoing conversation. It's not just about cybersecurity. It's about the whole service the MSP offers, but it's a relationship built on trust. And in a roundabout way, the business element will take care of itself if that relationship based on trust is there.
Yeah, and I like the kind of heartbeat idea of sending out some information. It's kind of optional to read. You don't have to read it, but you know what? It's there, keeps you in the loop, and it just shows as an MSP you're active, right? And you're staying on top of this. So I'll make sure that link is in the notes for all the listeners so they can follow up and get hold of your content.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think it's a valid point. So the whole marketing for MSPs, we see that as almost like a sub-industry now, don't we? Because MSPs, looking backwards, maybe traditionally haven't been the sharpest on that. They've been sharp. They've been focusing on the tech and ultimately what they do best. But now we're seeing this sub-industry rise up of MSP marketing. And if you go on LinkedIn, there's loads of people out there telling you, or giving you advice on how best to do it, because it's very much needed, because that communication piece, which is crucial, not just for instant response, but for the day-to-day, is needed. So yeah, for MSPs, that marketing angle is vital.
So to draw this to a conclusion with perhaps some specific actions that any of our listeners should be reflecting on, takeaways from this, the absolute must-haves that they should be doing. Perhaps we start with that regular drip of information that's educational, easy to consume. Step one.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, have that regular drip of information that entertain as well as educate your clients, and make sure that it all forms part of a larger plan, a strategy. So you need to have your strategy from day one. Yes, it's going to change over the years and as the threat changes, but you need a strategy to determine where you're going with this journey, something that both sides commit to. The MSP, I commit to being able to help you achieve this strategy. The client, I commit to give my time, resources, etc., to achieve it. And then once you've got that strategy, you both work at it. And as I say, Cyber Essentials is the basics, and that's why I always point to it. For some people, they may be on that already, so it may not be relevant. But once you've got the basics in place, strong passwords, MFA, antivirus, patching, and not many businesses, to be fair, even if they're big, have that in place properly, but effective vulnerability management. Once you have those basics in place, that's when you can start to really grow. But for me, it's all about awareness. If people are aware of the actual genuine threats they face, that will give them the motivation they need to get stuck into it. And if they've got that trusting relationship there with their MSP, they know that's the people they're going to turn to ask those questions and not feel stupid by asking those questions.
And the final takeaway, I think, for me is the start of that awareness educational journey with confirming Adam's point exactly, that this is your risk, not our risk, as the route into helping to prioritize the topic in the client's mind, and therefore be receptive to that education and the continual process.
And there's just one other thing I was just going to mention, actually. It's just kind of tying to this evidence piece and this risk sharing piece. And it's just, I'm looking at the GTIA tabletop exercises. I don't know if you've seen this or not. I haven't well, there we go. We've both got our own copies on our desk here. So how good is that? And for me, this is like the next level on. This is where you're actually showing or, demonstrating directly, or the client's demonstrating to themselves where their gaps are in their process and starting to bring this thing to life. So I think there's so many different layers here. It's a huge area. But I think if an MSP goes about stacking and coordinating all these different layers, then they are going to naturally create a great business, essentially, and make their clients safer at the same time.
100%. And I absolutely love a tabletop exercise. I think that's exactly where lots of business should be heading towards. I think doing them too early isn't right. It won't help. But once you've got that understanding, once you've got the foundations, as we spoke about a moment ago, in place, that is when you start doing tabletop exercises. Firstly, to make you realize that these beautiful policies that you've written, they actually don't work, because you'll go through the instant response procedure. You'll get to the point where it says this person here is responsible for doing that. And in the tabletop exercise, they're away. The classic scenario. Or another scenario where you said, no, our policy is we will never pay any ransom. But when you have that difficult situation of, well, you're either going to lose the business or you're going to pay the ransom, well, you ultimately have no real choice there. And then it's the question of, okay, who in the business knows how to obtain cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and then transfer it to the cyber criminals? Well, the answer is nobody, because you haven't considered those things. And that's why tabletop exercises are so good, because they make you think outside of the box. And it gives you that practice for having those conversations, because making decisions in stressful situations is hard enough. And then when you make those decisions about cybersecurity and technical matters that most business owners either don't know about or have no real interest to learn more about, and they don't need to if they've got an MSP, but it's making sure they can communicate at a level where they can understand and make an informed decision, and that's crucial.
Very good. And somehow we've run out of time, as is often the case. Fascinating topic, in particular this one, and I think we've covered lots of ground, which is really good news. Undoubtedly, some of our listeners will be interested in carrying on the conversation. How best to get hold of you, Adam?
Perfect. Yeah. So for me, it's follow me on LinkedIn. I'm always talking about what I'm doing and sharing my insights on LinkedIn. I run monthly webinars as well, talking about threat intelligence, the news, the stories that you need to know about. I mentioned the cybersecurity snapshot, which I push out on LinkedIn every Thursday. So look out for that. And of course, my newsletter, which I mentioned as well. Again, that gets pushed out through LinkedIn. So the main thing to do is follow me on LinkedIn, and then you'll see more information about what I'm doing and what I'm talking about.
Thank you very much.